So now we'll start our 7-minute round of questions, and we're going to start with Dr. Eyolfson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate your efforts in this. My first question is regarding, correct me, Mr. Sayre, I think it was you said that the usage of marijuana among youth in Colorado has increased since legalization. Did you say that?
The reports that we've seen had increased. We now have seen in more recent reports that it has started to stabilize. But the early reports from Colorado, once it was legalized, that there was an increase in youth consumption. Correct.
Okay, yeah, because we have I have a communication from the Attorney General of Colorado that cites multiple surveys, including the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics, that says there's no. Basically, it was in line with the national average. And the National Survey on Drug Use and Health that actually showed that in between legalization and before it was legalized and afterwards, in Colorado, that youth use had declined by 12%. That was one of the findings that, the main finding that they're citing.
And there is a significant amount of reports out there regarding youth usage, and I am not exactly sure of the one specifically you referenced, but I have seen reports which had estimated at the onset that there was an increase of approximately 20%. I have seen a more recent report just as a week ago that indicates that youth usage is now stabilized and is just slightly below the national average in the United States. So I have seen that. But there was, in the onset, which really speaks to the public education portion of this and reaching out to youth about messaging about the dangers of cannabis use for young adults and youth. But our indications was initially, yes, it did go up.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more about education for youth. I think that's a key part of what needs to be done on this. Now, there were some concerns expressed about home cultivation, particularly exposure to youth, and that youth could get at it. Now, I brought up this example previously. We've had legalized home brewing of beer and wine for forever. Is there any evidence that there's been significant diversion of home brewed wine and beer to underage people? Is this an ongoing problem that we've had to deal with?
We certainly don't have any statistics on that kind of diversion. I don't think, and we anticipate that home grows will be much higher than what we see with home brewing. So I think our concerns are that we will see a lot more of the home grows than we certainly will with home brewing. So that's why we have a much more significant concern about that.
Sure.
And it's not just that about the access. It also has to do with the quality of the product being our experiences from attending to grow operations. With the molds that we've encountered in the residences, the issues with electrical thefts and the electrical systems and the dangers that are posed by that. And also, it will increase and cause more confusion for our officers on the road who are having to perhaps attend calls and now have to address somebody who may have 2 or 3 or 4 extra plants or a plant that's 50 centimeters taller than what it should be. So our lessons we have learned from Washington, Colorado is start restrictive, start slow, and then slowly as we start to unravel this legislation, we can start to perhaps look at some other opportunities such as that, but certainly we'd like to see it more restrictive and no home grows.
Okay, certainly. Now, and I was just wondering where this, there was a scenario that was stated, and forgive me, I don't remember who had said this, but talked about if you had a 200 block or 200 unit apartment block and if half of them had them. Do we have any data to suggest that on this regimen, half of the units in a 200 unit block would be growing 4 plants?
That was my scenario. I would suggest that I don't have any evidence that could prove that, nor do I have any evidence to say that won't happen. The reality is, when you open the legislation, our position on that is that there's no need to do it when we're going to have a legalized system where people can access marijuana. So if we have an apartment complex or a smaller complex, yesterday on my way here, I listened to a documentary on the CBC, a bunch of landlords that got together and talked about this. They're very concerned about how are they going to protect their buildings from these type of issues if home grows are legal.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Now, I agree completely with everyone here. Everyone agrees that we need resources for training, And we've talked about the money that the federal government's committing to this. Now, one of the things that was mentioned is increased training in recognition. Now, I understand that. I mean, again, I know that your forces all have experience with grow ops. So how much additional training would be involved? Because I would imagine that already officers know how to recognize these plants and how to recognize grow ops. How much additional training would be needed? And I'm not talking about the other issues like impaired driving, but just in recognition and dealing with grow ops.
One of the challenges for us with the training is that we haven't been able to even start preparing any training packages or training in any sense, because we at this point don't know what is going to be encompassed in both provincial and federal legislation or municipal. So we're sort of in a holding pattern, but certainly at the onset we are going to have to ensure that our members understand completely the legislation, their authorities under the legislation, both provincially, federally. But that is our challenge, is that at this point, and in talking to directors of police academies, that they have not been able in any way to start that preparation until we actually have the final legislation from all levels of government prepared. So that is where we're concerned and challenged. As far as how long that will take, again, that's difficult for us to answer right now, because we do not yet have all the answers that we need to make informed decisions about what that training will encompass.
All right. Yeah, I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to Ms.